I was treated like a stranger in my own home.
Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? The question echoed in Evelyn Marston's mind as she stood at the kitchen counter, her hands moving automatically through the morning routine, cracking eggs, flipping pancakes, slicing fruit, and pouring coffee into a travel mug. The house around her buzzed with activity, sunlight just beginning to pour through the wide windows, illuminating the glint of stainless steel appliances and the pale blue tile backsplash she'd chosen herself. Outside, the street was already alive. Neighbors jogging with dogs, the distant roar of a school bus rolling past, the hum of lawnmowers starting up. But inside, in the heart of the Marston household, Evelyn felt like a ghost drifting through her own life. She glanced at the clock. 7:08 a.m. Her husband, Brandon, was at the breakfast table, laptop open, tie loosened, eyes glued to an email he'd been rereading, probably for the third time. His brow was furrowed, lips pressed into a thin line as he scrolled, occasionally mumbling something about quarterly projections under his breath. The aroma of coffee drifted toward him, but he didn't seem to notice. Evelyn slid the mug into his reach anyway. "Toast or pancakes?" she asked, her voice light, expectant. Brandon didn't look up, fingers tapping at the keyboard. "Toast or pancakes?" she repeated, forcing a cheerful note she didn't feel. Toast is fine," he answered, distracted, eyes never leaving the screen. She placed 2 slices in the toaster and turned to the kitchen island, where her daughter Sophie was hunched over her phone, earbuds in, art journal open beside a bowl of untouched cereal. Sophie's glossy brown hair fell in a neat curtain, hiding her expression, her thumbs moving rapidly as she scrolled through her feed. Occasionally, she'd pause to sketch a quick doodle in the margins of her notebook, lips pursed in concentration. Evelyn smiled, remembering how Sophie used to chatter away at the breakfast table, her imagination unstoppable. These days, it was as if she lived in a world that existed just beyond reach, a world of friends, group chats, and TikTok trends Evelyn could only guess at. "Morning, honey," Evelyn said quietly, gently tucking a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear. Sophie flinched, barely glancing up. "Morning," she muttered, one earbud slipping out. "Do we have any almond milk?" "In the fridge, right side," Evelyn replied, trying to keep her tone upbeat. Sophie didn't say thank you. She rose, snagged the carton, and poured a splash into her cereal before drifting back to her seat, gaze fixed on her phone again. Evelyn watched her for a moment, a tightness settling in her chest. She wanted to ask about Sophie's art project, about the audition she'd mentioned last week, about anything. But the words caught in her throat. A door banged upstairs. Tyler, their 12-year-old, thundered down the staircase, backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers untied, hair sticking up in every direction. He made a beeline for the fridge, bypassing Evelyn entirely, and grabbed a juice box. He ripped off the straw, jabbed it in with a practiced motion, and took a long sip. "Morning, Tyler," Evelyn said, trying to catch his eye. "Hey, Mom, did you wash my soccer jersey?" he asked, not waiting for an answer as he rifled through the laundry basket by the stairs. "It's folded on your dresser, sweetie, and your cleats are by the back door," she replied. "Cool. Thanks," Tyler said, but he was already halfway out of the kitchen, eyes glued to his Nintendo Switch, fingers flying over the buttons as he maneuvered his digital avatar through some virtual world. Evelyn exhaled, barely aware that she'd been holding her breath. She set pancakes on a plate, buttered the toast, packed lunchboxes, turkey sandwiches, apple slices, granola bars, each labeled neatly with names and little notes she'd started adding when the kids were younger. "You're going to do great today," or "Remember, you're loved." She wondered if they even noticed anymore. The family moved around her in a practiced ballet of avoidance, Brandon typing, Sophie scrolling, Tyler gaming. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator, the clatter of utensils, the occasional buzz of a phone notification. Evelyn's attempts at conversation died in the air, unacknowledged. Brandon stood abruptly, slinging his laptop bag over his shoulder. I've got a call at 8:30, so I need to head out early. Can you make sure the dry cleaning gets picked up? Evelyn nodded, forcing a smile. Of course. He kissed the top of her head, absent-minded, coffee in hand. Thanks, Ev, he murmured, already halfway to the door. Sophie gathered her things, still not meeting her mother's eyes. I'll be home late. There's a study group after school, she said. Text me if you need a ride, Evelyn replied. But Sophie had already disappeared down the hall, the front door clicking shut behind her. Tyler followed a few minutes later, headphones on, backpack swinging. Bye, Mom, he called, not waiting for her response. And then the house was silent, save for the ticking of the clock and the distant rumble of a garbage truck passing by. Evelyn stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of a morning she'd orchestrated and executed perfectly, and felt emptier than she'd care to admit. She moved through the rooms, collecting crumpled napkins, rinsing plates, wiping down counters. The sun had risen fully now, casting sharp, golden beams across the marble countertops and illuminating the smudges on the fridge she hadn't noticed before. Through the wide bay window, she could see the neighbor's dog chasing after a squirrel, the mailman making his rounds, Grace Linwood across the street hauling groceries from her SUV. Evelyn paused, pressing her palm against the cool glass, watching the world continue just beyond her reach. It was strange, she thought, how you could be surrounded by people and still feel alone, how the ones you loved most could move through your life without ever really seeing you. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A calendar reminder. Grocery pickup, 10 a.m., dentist. 2:45 p.m., Tyler. Call Mom. She scrolled through her messages, appointment confirmations, a PTA group chat, a coupon from the local market. Nothing personal, nothing meaningful. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the empty chairs around her. The room felt cavernous, echoing with the absence of laughter, conversation, even arguments. She tried to imagine what her family would say if she disappeared for a day or a week. Would they notice? Would the laundry pile up? Dinners go unmade? Schedules fall apart? Or would they simply adapt, oblivious to the invisible glue that held their lives together? A wave of frustration washed over her, mingled with something softer. Longing, maybe, or regret. She'd chosen this life, hadn't she? She'd wanted to be present for every moment, to be the one her family depended on. But somewhere along the way, she'd become background noise, a fixture as unremarkable as the kitchen clock. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find Grace standing there, a reusable grocery bag slung over her shoulder, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Hey, Ev! You look like you could use some fresh air, Grace said, her eyes crinkling in a knowing smile. Evelyn hesitated, glancing back at the empty house. Maybe later, she said, voice softer than she intended. I've got a lot to do. Grace nodded, not pressing the issue. Let me know if you change your mind. I'm just across the street, okay? Evelyn smiled, grateful for the offer, but as she closed the door, the weight of her loneliness pressed in again. She busied herself with chores, loading the dishwasher, folding towels, checking off items on her to-do list, but the sense of invisibility lingered. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, the lines at the corners of her eyes, the tiredness in her expression. She ran a hand through her hair, tried to smooth the worry from her brow. In the afternoon, she stood in the front yard, watering the garden. The Texas sun was relentless, beads of sweat gathering at her temples, but she found solace in the rhythm. Spray, soak, move on. A delivery truck rolled by. The driver waved. Evelyn waved back, wondering if he remembered her name from the dozens of packages she'd signed for over the years. Inside, she tidied the living room, fluffing pillows, straightening magazines, picking up stray socks. She paused by the family photo on the mantel, Brandon's arm around her shoulders, Sophie grinning, Tyler making a goofy face. It had been taken 3 summers ago, at a lake house outside Dallas. She remembered the heat, the laughter, the feeling that they were all in sync, just for a moment. She wondered when that feeling had slipped away. When the kids returned home, the routine resumed. Sophie dropped her backpack by the door, mumbled something about homework, and vanished upstairs. Tyler raided the pantry for snacks, retreated to the den, headphones clamped over his ears. Brandon texted to say he'd be late, stuck at the office. Dinner was a quiet affair. Evelyn eating alone at the kitchen island, scrolling through recipe blogs she'd bookmarked but never tried. The house grew dim as the sun set, shadows stretching across the hardwood floors. Dishes washed, lights turned off. Evelyn wandered to the living room window and looked out at the quiet street. The neighborhood was peaceful. Families walking dogs, porch lights flickering on, the distant sound of laughter drifting from open windows. She rested her forehead against the glass, eyes stinging with unshed tears. She wondered, not for the first time, if anyone truly saw her. If the people she loved realized how much she gave, how hard she tried, how quietly she kept their world turning. The house was silent. The night pressed in. And Evelyn Marston, surrounded by the comforts of home, felt like a stranger in her own life. The days after that morning unfolded in a blur of sameness, yet each one seemed to weigh heavier on Evelyn's chest. The Marston house, always so full of noise and motion, felt somehow emptier with every passing hour, despite the constant hum of voices, footsteps, and electronic notifications. Evelyn woke before dawn most mornings, padding quietly through the kitchen in her slippers, prepping breakfast and lunches before anyone else stirred. She would glance at the family calendar pinned to the fridge, color-coded with everyone's commitments, and try to find a sliver of white space, somewhere she could be more than just the person in charge of keeping it all running. On Monday, she decided to try something she'd always loved: a proper family dinner. Nothing frozen or microwaved. She spent the afternoon simmering a pot of her mother's chicken and dumplings, the scent filling every corner of the house. She set the dining table with her best plates, even folded cloth napkins, and placed a small vase of wildflowers in the center, picked from the edge of their yard, where the lawn met the neighbor's fence. As 6 o'clock approached, Evelyn called out, "Dinner in 10." She could hear Sophie's music thumping through her closed bedroom door upstairs. Tyler, pressed into the couch and clutching his game controller, barely looked up. Brandon's car had just pulled into the driveway, and she felt a flicker of hope. Brandon strode in, phone at his ear, mouthing a distracted, "Hey, hun." He disappeared into the study, shutting the door behind him. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The dumplings, once plump and perfect, began to sink in the pot. Evelyn tried again, her voice firmer. "Guys, dinner's ready." Her only answer was the faint rising sound of Sophie's laughter, clearly on a call with a friend. By 7, Evelyn sat alone at the end of the table, the food cooling in front of her. She stared at the empty chairs, the flowers drooping a little, and tried not to feel foolish. Eventually, Brandon emerged, rubbing his eyes, and scooped a bowl with a brief, "Smells good, thanks." He retreated to the living room, bowl in one hand, phone in the other. Tyler wandered in later, grabbing a slice of bread, his thumbs never leaving the buttons of his handheld console. Sophie never appeared at all. Evelyn cleaned up in silence, scraping untouched dumplings into the compost bin. She rinsed the dishes, the hot water stinging her hands, and wondered if her efforts had made any difference at all. The week unfolded in much the same way. Sophie left early for school, earbuds in, barely offering a, "Bye, Mom." She spent most afternoons holed up in her room, the light beneath her door slipping out into the hallway after midnight. When Evelyn knocked to ask about homework or offer a snack, Sophie replied with a distracted, "I'm fine, Mom. Thanks." Tyler, after school, vanished into his world of digital battles and YouTube streams. Even when Evelyn sat beside him asking about his day, he grunted, "Good," or "Dunno," his eyes never leaving the screen. She tried to engage, suggesting board games, walks, or even baking cookies together, but Tyler always had a reason to stay glued to his devices. Brandon, meanwhile, seemed to exist in a different dimension altogether. His job at the tech company had always kept him busy, But lately, work bled into every corner of their lives. He answered emails during dinner, took client calls in the car, and spent late nights hunched over spreadsheets in the study. When Evelyn tried to share something, a funny story from the grocery store, a memory from when they first moved to Austin, Brandon would nod absently, eyes flicking back to his laptop. One evening, as Evelyn folded laundry in the master bedroom, she overheard Brandon on a call in the hallway. He laughed, a warm, genuine laugh she hadn't heard in months, while talking about a team-building event at work. His voice was animated as he described the barbecue lunch and cornhole tournament, the camaraderie with his colleagues. Evelyn felt a pang of jealousy, followed by guilt. Why did it seem like he saved his best self for everyone but his own family? By Thursday, Evelyn's patience began to fray. She found herself scrolling through old family photos on her phone. Sophie at 6, grinning with a gap-toothed smile. Tyler, chubby-cheeked and sticky with popsicle. Brandon, arms wrapped around her at a 4th of July picnic. She remembered laughter, inside jokes, the chaos that felt warm and close. Now her days were defined by silence and brief, distracted exchanges. That afternoon, desperate for a change of scenery, Evelyn texted Grace Linwood, her neighbor and longtime friend. "Walk after dinner?" she wrote. Grace replied instantly, "Would love to. Meet at the park?" As dusk settled, Evelyn met Grace at the entrance to the neighborhood park. The path snaked between leafy oaks, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and freshly mown grass. They walked side by side as dusk deepened, the sky painted with streaks of orange and lavender. Grace glanced at her, reading the exhaustion in Evelyn's eyes. "You look tired. Everything okay at home?" Evelyn hesitated, then let the words spill out. I feel like a ghost in my own house. I do everything, meals, laundry, schedules, and no one seems to notice. I tried to get everyone together for dinner, but I ended up eating alone. Again. Brandon's buried in work. The kids are somewhere else, all the time. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Grace nodded, her brow furrowed. "You're not doing anything wrong, Ev. Kids get wrapped up in their own lives. Husbands get busy. But you can't pour from an empty cup, you know. When was the last time you did something just for you?" Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't even remember. Maybe before the kids were born?" Grace smiled gently. "Maybe it's time to change that. Even just a little. You deserve to feel seen, Ev." The words stuck with Evelyn on the walk home. She replayed Grace's advice in her mind as she tidied up the living room, picking up scattered socks and empty mugs. Later, in the quiet of her bedroom, she pulled out her laptop and hesitantly searched for local classes. Something creative, something that could belong just to her. A listing for a creative writing workshop caught her eye. She'd always loved stories, even kept a journal hidden in her nightstand. Her heart raced as she hovered over the register button. Was she really allowed to do this? The doubt crept in. What if Brandon or the kids needed her? What if it was selfish? But Grace's voice echoed. "You deserve to feel seen." Evelyn took a shaky breath and clicked, "Sign up." The confirmation email landed in her inbox, a small thrill fluttering in her chest. She closed her laptop and sat in the dim glow of her bedside lamp, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. She wondered if her family would even notice. She wondered if it mattered. Sitting there, Evelyn realized she'd taken the tiniest step toward reclaiming herself. For the first time in ages, she smiled. A real private smile. As she reached over to turn off the light, Grace's words lingered. "Maybe it's time you put yourself first, even just a little. If you've ever felt invisible, or like your efforts go unnoticed, you're not alone." What would you do in Evelyn's shoes? Subscribe now to see how Evelyn's journey unfolds. Sometimes the smallest step can change everything. The house settled around her, quiet and still. Down the hall, Sophie's music played softly, Tyler's game console beeped, and Brandon's voice murmured through a closed door. But in her room, Evelyn felt, for the first time in a long while, just a little bit more like herself. The mornings had changed. It was subtle at first. Evelyn would pour her own coffee, slip quietly out the door, and leave the kitchen table set but untouched. Instead of hovering in the background, anticipating everyone's needs, she now had somewhere to be. Her creative writing class at the local community center. The first week, nobody really noticed. Brandon rushed out earlier than usual, Bluetooth headset already in place, barking instructions to someone from his office as he buttoned his shirt. Tyler, his hair sticking up in all directions, scoured the fridge for breakfast and resorted to cold cereal. Sophie, earbuds in, barely glanced up from her phone as she crammed books into her backpack. But as days passed, Evelyn's absence became impossible to ignore. The house, always so seamless in its routines, began to show cracks. It was Thursday evening, heavy clouds gathering outside, when the tension finally started to boil over. Brandon stepped through the front door, juggling his laptop bag and a tangle of charger cords, phone pressed to his ear. He blinked at the silence. No savory aroma drifted from the kitchen, no clatter of pans or soft hum of music. The counters were cluttered with dishes from breakfast, lunch bags lay half open, and a sticky note. Her handwriting, unmistakable, was taped to the fridge. Class tonight. Back after 8. Leftovers in the fridge. He frowned, pressing the phone between his shoulder and ear as he opened the fridge. A container of pasta, a half-eaten salad, and some sliced fruit. Nothing warm, nothing new. Tyler stomped down the stairs, eyes glued to his tablet. "Dad, what's for dinner?" Brandon forced a smile, still negotiating a deadline with a colleague on the phone. "Just a sec, buddy." Tyler groaned, dropping his tablet on the table. "I'm starving. Is Mom home?" Brandon shook his head. "She's at her class." He ended the call and turned to Tyler. "How about grilled cheese?" Tyler made a face. "That's not real dinner." Brandon bristled but said nothing. He rummaged through the cabinets, finding bread, butter, cheese. The kitchen felt unfamiliar, like someone else's space. The cutting board was missing. Where did she keep the spatula? Upstairs, Sophie's bedroom door banged open. She appeared at the top of the stairs, frustration etched into her features. "Dad, did you move my laundry?" He looked up, exasperated. "No, I didn't touch it." "It's not in the basket." Sophie's arms crossed. "I don't have anything clean for tomorrow." Brandon sighed, spreading butter on bread with a dull knife. "I'll check after dinner, okay?" Tyler slumped at the counter, watching his dad struggle. "Mom always knows where everything is." Brandon's jaw tightened. "She's busy tonight." Sophie stomped down the stairs, glancing around the cluttered kitchen. "Why does it feel like everything's falling apart?" No one answered. Rain began to tap against the windows, a steady, insistent rhythm. Evelyn's class was a world away from the disarray at home. Warm yellow light filled the small classroom, walls decorated with student stories and printed poems. Laughter echoed as she listened to her new friends, Maya, a retired nurse with a knack for storytelling, and Jordan, a young dad writing children's books, share their drafts. For 2 hours each week, she was just Evelyn, a person with dreams and ideas, not the invisible caretaker. On the drive home, however, her thoughts drifted back to the house. Would they have eaten? Did Tyler find his allergy medication? Did Sophie finish her homework? She pulled into the driveway, the porch light glowing softly. From the outside, her home looked exactly the same. Inside, she braced herself. She walked in to find Brandon at the stove, scrutinizing a burned skillet, the air thick with the smell of scorched bread. Tyler sat at the kitchen island, poking half-heartedly at a grilled cheese sandwich, and Sophie scrolled through her phone, the laundry basket at her feet, still full of dirty clothes. Brandon glanced up as she entered, irritation flickering in his eyes before it softened into something like guilt. "Hey, you're back." Evelyn forced a small, tired smile. "How was dinner?" Tyler piped up. "Dad almost set off the smoke alarm." Sophie added, And I have nothing to wear tomorrow. Evelyn set down her bag and hung her coat, a strange mix of sympathy and vindication rising inside her. She took a steadying breath. Did anyone check the dryer? Sometimes it's stuck on the last cycle. Sophie blinked, then hurried off to check. Tyler looked at his mom, then his dad. Can you make pancakes tomorrow? Brandon stared at the mess of dishes, the ruined pan, the crumbs scattered across the counter. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older. I didn't realize how much you do around here, he said quietly. I mean, it's a lot. Evelyn met his eyes. Her voice was soft but steady. I know. He hesitated, then crossed the kitchen. I'm sorry, Ev. I guess I never really thought about it. I always figured you had it handled. She felt a sting behind her eyes, but she wouldn't cry. Not now. It's not just about the chores, Brandon. It's about being seen, heard, noticing each other. He nodded, uncertain, searching for words. I'll try. Evelyn nodded, exhaustion settling in her bones. Me too. The following days brought a new kind of tension. At first, the Marston house teetered on chaos. Dishes piled up. Tyler forgot to feed the dog. Sophie missed the bus and had to be driven to school. Brandon tried to step in, but his efforts felt clumsy. He bought groceries but forgot half the list. He offered to cook but only managed simple meals. One afternoon, Evelyn walked into the kitchen to find Brandon hunched over his laptop, frowning at an online recipe. The counter overflowed with ingredients, most of them the wrong ones. He looked up, sheepish. Did you know there are, 4 different kinds of parsley? She smiled, a genuine one this time. You get points for effort. He chuckled, relief flooding his face. I'm trying, Ev. I really am. I see that, she said, and she did. Sophie, too, began to notice the little things. She left her phone in her room and lingered after dinner, helping clear plates. Tyler asked Evelyn to show him how to fold his laundry, grumbling but secretly proud when he got it right. The house felt different, charged with awkwardness, but also possibility, a shifting of old patterns. Still, Evelyn could feel a wall. The family's efforts were real, but there was an unspoken question in the air. Would things ever go back to normal? Did she want them to? One Friday evening, as dusk settled and the sky bruised purple, Evelyn found herself alone at the kitchen window, watching the world outside. The Marstons had survived the week, but only just. Grace Linwood appeared on the sidewalk, waving as she passed. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, grateful for the fresh air. Grace smiled knowingly. How's the revolution? Evelyn gave a half laugh. Messier than I expected. Grace leaned in, voice gentle. It takes time. People don't change overnight, but sometimes they need to lose something to realize its worth. Evelyn nodded, her thoughts heavy. I don't want to go back to the way things were. I need to matter too. Grace squeezed her arm. You do. Don't let them forget it. That night, the turning point arrived. Brandon was working late, papers spread across the dining room table. Tyler was in his room, headphones on, lost in a game. Sophie sat at the counter, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook. Evelyn gathered her courage and called a family meeting. Can everyone come here for a minute? There were groans, but eventually they all assembled in the living room. Brandon with his laptop, Tyler dragging his feet, Sophie rolling her eyes. Evelyn stood, hands clasped, voice trembling with vulnerability. I need to say something. I know things have been different lately, maybe even harder. But I want you all to understand why. She took a deep breath. For years I tried to do everything, for everyone. I thought if I worked harder, loved more, maybe you'd see me. But I felt invisible, like a stranger in my own home. Tyler looked up, startled. Sophie's eyes widened. Brandon's jaw clenched, guilt flickering across his face. Evelyn continued, her voice steadier. I started going to that class because I needed something for myself. Not because I stopped caring about you, but because I needed to remember who I am. I can't keep doing everything alone. I won't. A heavy silence settled. For the first time, they seemed to really see her, not just as mom or wife, but as Evelyn. Brandon's voice was rough. Why didn't you say anything before? Evelyn met his gaze. I tried. You just weren't listening. Sophie's voice was small. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know. Tyler mumbled. Me neither. Evelyn nodded, tears pricking her eyes. I know. But things have to change. All of us. Together. Brandon set his laptop aside and reached out, taking her hand. We can do better. We will do better. Sophie moved closer, hugging her around the waist. Tyler shuffled in, wrapping his arms around them both. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt truly seen. As the family embraced, a sense of hope blossomed, a fragile, tentative promise that things could be different. That night, there were no grand gestures, no sudden fixes, but there was understanding. And for Evelyn, that changed everything. The answer had been there all along. Her voice, finally heard, was the key. The first thing Evelyn noticed that evening was the quiet. It was a rare hush, one that blanketed the house after a day of tension and confusion. The kitchen, usually bustling with the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, or at least the television, was still. The only sound was the gentle tick of the wall clock and the faint buzz of cicadas outside, carried in by a warm Texas breeze through the screen door. She set her tote bag on the counter, filled with rough drafts from her creative writing class. Her mind was still lingering on the last prompt. Right about a turning point, and for the first time in a long while, she felt as if she was living it. Evelyn glanced around. The dinner table was a mess of empty plates and half-eaten food. Someone had tried to make pasta. The noodles clung together in a sticky mound, and a pot of red sauce sat cooling on the stove. There were traces of flour near the sink. Tyler's video game controller was abandoned on a chair, and Sophie's textbook lay open, a highlighter cap chewed to bits. She hesitated in the doorway, realizing that for the first time she wasn't compelled to start cleaning up. Instead, she stood there, simply observing, letting herself see the scene as it was, a little chaotic, a little imperfect, but alive. From upstairs, she heard footsteps. Brandon appeared at the top of the stairs, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed. An unusual look for him. He paused when he saw her, uncertainty flickering across his face. Hey, he said, voice tentative. Hi, Evelyn replied, setting the bag aside. There was an awkward moment, the kind that stretched and made both of them aware of the distance that had grown, quietly, over the years. Brandon cleared his throat. We, tried to make dinner. I think we underestimated how much goes into it. He managed a sheepish smile. And how much you do. Every single day. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and saw the fatigue in his eyes. Not just from work, but from the sudden realization of how much he'd taken for granted. It's not just dinner, she said softly, her voice steady. It's everything. I wanted us to feel like a family, not just people living in the same house. Brandon stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm sorry, Ev. I've been so wrapped up in work. I didn't see how much I was missing. We all did. Before Evelyn could respond, Sophie and Tyler edged into the kitchen, both hovering in the doorway. Sophie clutched her phone, staring at the floor, her cheeks flushed. Mom, Sophie began, her tone hesitant. I know I've been distant. I didn't realize how much you did until I had to figure out dinner with Dad. She looked up, her eyes shimmering with emotion. It was actually kind of a disaster, but it made me realize I miss talking with you. I miss you. Tyler nodded, a little sheepish himself. Yeah, and I had no idea how hard it is to keep things going. I'm sorry, Mom. Evelyn's heart tightened and swelled all at once. She dreamed of being seen, heard, needed, not just for her chores, but for who she was. She drew a slow breath and smiled. Thank you. That means a lot. Brandon pulled out a chair, gesturing for her to sit. Let's eat together. It might not be perfect, but it's ours. They gathered around the table, laughter breaking out as Tyler recounted the saga of the stuck noodles, and Sophie admitted to nearly burning the garlic bread. The food was lukewarm and the pasta a little gummy, but Evelyn couldn't remember a meal that tasted better. It wasn't about the food, it was about the effort, the recognition, and the shared moment. After dinner, as they cleared plates, together this time, Brandon turned to Evelyn. "How was your writing class?" Evelyn's eyes lit up. She found herself talking about her story ideas, the friends she'd made, and the small joys of rediscovering something just for herself. Sophie listened, genuinely curious, and Tyler chimed in with suggestions for a sci-fi plot twist. Brandon squeezed her hand. "I want you to keep doing this, and I want to help more. We all should." The days that followed saw real, tangible changes. Not abrupt, not perfect, but steady. Brandon began coming home earlier when he could, leaving his phone in the mudroom. Sophie set aside time each week for a walk with Evelyn, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to share space. Tyler took responsibility for one chore a day, sometimes with grumbling but always with effort. Evelyn continued her classes, carving out time for herself not out of guilt, but because she'd learned she mattered too. She let go of the belief that her worth was measured in spotless counters and perfectly folded laundry. She started writing stories inspired by her own life, by the messiness and beauty of being seen. One crisp Saturday morning, Evelyn sat on the porch with Grace, sipping coffee as the sun climbed over the rooftops. The street buzzed with weekend energy, kids on bikes, neighbors chatting over hedges, the distant jingle of an ice cream truck. Grace smiled, nudging her gently. "You look lighter, Evelyn. Happier." Evelyn laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I think I finally remembered who I am, not just who I am to everyone else." Grace nodded, her eyes kind. "Sometimes, putting yourself first is the best thing you can do for your family. It gives them the chance to see you, all of you." Evelyn gazed at her home, the chaos and warmth within. She knew things wouldn't always be perfect. There would be busy days, miscommunications, and the occasional burnt dinner. But there would also be laughter, connection, and a place at the table for her, not just as the caretaker, but as a whole person. She stood, stretching, feeling the sunshine on her face. "I think I'm ready to write my next story." Grace grinned. "I can't wait to read it." As Evelyn headed inside, she paused at the doorway, watching her family gathered in the living room, Brandon reading, Sophie doodling in her sketchbook, Tyler sprawled on the rug, giggling at something on his tablet. She felt seen. She felt home. And maybe, just maybe, she thought, her story could help someone else who felt invisible in their own home. If Evelyn's journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own life, or wondered what would happen if you finally put yourself first, let us know in the comments. Share your experiences, your turning points, or simply your thoughts. And if you found this story moving, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Your story matters too, and we can't wait to hear it. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important person you need to show up for is yourself.